The name of this little seminar is the Tried and True Old Trends, and they picked an old guy to do this, me. And I've been doing it a long time. I've been doing it almost 40 years, and I'll give you a little background, but these seminars are for you guys, so I want you to feel really free to ask questions, and because I work in my little world, my little bubble, and to keep up with trends can be really hard because they're changing so quickly, and you got to kind of sort out what's relevant and what's just more hype and what's going to get more sales. And really quickly, I'll tell you a story that convinced me of that when I was younger. Do you want a little background?
Sure.
A little background, okay. I started building bikes as a little kid. Well, first of all, I started riding bikes when I was really young. I was raised at the base of Mount Tamalpais, which is just a beautiful mountain. And how I kind of got hooked into cycling was I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My mom passed away when I was 8, so I turned into a latchkey kid. And the thing that made me feel really good was to explore. And I remember grabbing one of my brother's old Schwinn paperboy bikes that weighed about 60 pounds. And the handlebars were up to here. And I would take that and I would ride and push as far as I could as a little kid. But it wasn't until I got strong enough to get to the top of Mount Tam and get all the way out to Bolinas Ridge that I discovered the Wild West. And when I looked at this panorama, I was on dirt roads, and it just felt so good to be out there on a bicycle and to be free and to explore things. I always had a passion for, checking out creeks for fishing and just new places. And when I got out on Bolinas Ridge, it's called Ridgecrest, I saw everything north that I'd never seen before. It was this rolling hills and mountains and just incredible. And the vision I had, did you ever see Johnny Appleseed when you were a kid? Just rows and rows of apple trees and everything. Well, there's an old homestead on Ridgecrest, and it has an apple tree on it. And of course, when I found that, I pretty much thought I was in heaven. And so the reason I'm telling you this story is because I ran back, told my dad, "You're not going to believe what I found. I discovered the Wild West." I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Anyway, cycling. So that's what cycling meant to me. Just as a kid, it kind of was a place where I felt really comfortable, and it was a place of inspiration, and you kind of clear your head. It always felt really good. So I started building bikes, and when I got to high school, I did the junkyard bike thing. I would go to the dumps and buy. I didn't have a car or a truck or anything, but I'd pay my buddies a little gas money, and I'd negotiate between 25 and 35 cents per old roll fast or Schwinn frames at the dumps that were all busted up and in pieces. And I'd bring them back to my high school machine shop, and I'd braze them up and fix them, and I'd throw parts on them, and I'd ride them, and I thought they were pretty cool. I mean, they were still gigantic, 45-pound bikes, but they were really cool, and they just kind of got a little better and better each time I did it. And I started seeing where things would break and fall apart. And so long and short of it, I did that, and I had a career in racing motorcycles professionally for quite a few years. I was a Class C pro, doing half miles, indoor short tracks, motocross. I did everything. I just 2 wheels. I loved it. And so anyway, I did a trip in '79 or '80 with Joe Breeze. Joe Breeze and I grew up together. He's another bike pioneer. We went to New Zealand, and we traveled through New Zealand, and I have to say it was one of the best trips of my entire life. I was a sheet metal worker, doing sheet metal work. I was a supervisor at a big commercial sheet metal shop making things. I've always made things my whole life. Doing layout work, copper hoods, stainless steel, welding, brazing, everything. And when I was over there, I went, you know what? I'm going to make bikes for a living. That was it for me. I was like, I'm going to just make bikes. And I came back. I sold everything I owned. And I sold everything. I owned a home that I bought that when I was a kid, I worked hard on it and fixed it up. And I sold my windsurfer, my truck. I sold everything. And I bought a lathe and a mill, my welder, some more tools. And I rented a little 2-car garage for $35 a month that I could barely pay the rent. And I just started over. I just started building bikes. So that kind of led to my relationship with Charlie Cunningham and Mark Slate, which we kind of accidentally started wilderness trail bikes because no mountain bike parts there. This is back in 1980. So we thought, well, let's make some hubs that won't break. Let's make a brake. We made the roller cam brake. Now let's make some, bottom bracket and bearing system. So we were trying to make things that lasted forever. Now this was the little point I was trying to make. At one time we were the largest licensor of intellectual property. We did tires for Specialized, designed bikes for Trek, things for Blackburn, Bell Sports, Suntour. The list went on. We were just going crazy making stuff for these bikes, and it wasn't available previously. So we had a little visit with Shinpei Okajima, which is the head engineer at Shimano, and we had this little drop bar shifter that we wanted them to license, and it was a way when guys go for a breakaway, they always kind of tipped everybody off, which was a detriment to their trying to make a surprise breakaway on road bikes and road racing. And so the minute you'd see the lead guy go for a shifter on the down tube, everybody knew he was dropping a gear to break away. So it was a giveaway. So we made the drop bar shifter that was on the handlebars that allowed you to brake and shift at the same time. So we made these, and the 7-Eleven team bought them from us because they thought it's the breakaway secret. So anyway, things started to happen, and quick little story. The Shimano guys came by and wanted to do this, and we were making a bearing system that allowed you to purge and lubricate a bearing from the inside out, and the bearings would last forever. And this was the question he asked me. He says, "Why do you want it to last forever?" He said, "We just want to make stuff that lasts forever." And that was our whole deal. He goes, "That's not a very good business." So it was, and I still want to make things that last forever. It's never left my soul, but he was right. It's not a great business plan, but I never envisioned, coming out with a new model every year like everybody else. So that was kind of a fun little episode there, and I knew we were kind of hitting the big time when one day the big black rental car came up, and all these engineers kind of piled out at my little shop. Now my shop was a 2-car garage. It had a workbench and my stuff and welding gear. And I was making bikes, and I didn't even know who was going to buy them. I was just kind of terrified. I just made them because I loved to make them. And if I had $2 for a burrito, I was really happy. So we're in the shop, and I'm making stuff, and this car comes up, and it's Genzo Kawai, the owner of Suntour. Do you guys remember Suntour?
Yeah.
And one time they were the world's largest bicycle component maker. And he comes out with all the engineers. Now my shop is the shop. I had a whole blue rotary dial phone. I'm kind of dating myself, aren't I? Rotary phone. I had a water faucet and a kerosene heater and no bathroom. So what I used for the bathroom was the Schwinn shop was 2 blocks away. So I run down there, "Hey John, how's it going? Use the bathroom?" And this is what you do when you're young. You don't do it at my age anymore. So anyway, they all show up, and they're interested in what we're doing in the mountain bike world. And it was this. We're talking 35 years ago. And it was a long time ago. And anyway, so they're all there, they're talking, and they want to see this and the brakes and this bearing system and all. And all of a sudden, one of the engineers says, "Oh, can I use your restroom?" And I went into complete panic. I'm like, boy, we got to change the subject really quick. I did not know what to do, but I got on my old blue rotary dial phone, and I called up John Lewis at the Schwinn shop. I go, "John, we have a real problem here. Mr. Kawai is here from Japan, and they need to use the bathroom." He says, "Bring them on down." So I got them all piled in the car, and we went. So these are the beginnings of my bike passion, really from the ground up. It really, really was. So fast forward, my friends Charlie Cunningham and Mark Slate and I started a company called Wilderness Trail Bikes, which is WTB, and it's still going. Charlie and I left WTB in 2000. It's just an evolution of business. And I continued to make bikes. As I found as that company was growing, I was getting drawn into managing and traveling and trade shows all over the world. And I was pulled further and further away from the thing that I was really passionate about, which is making bikes and doing a lot of stuff. I've worked on a lot of other projects just because I was passionate about it. I worked on a life-saving device with a friend once, and that was, saving lives, people that fall overboard on boards. It's called the Sea Hero, and it's kind of in a development stage right now. But I do things that I'm passionate about and I love doing. And probably the big subject of this thing is trends and where things are going. And I go into a bike shop nowadays and I go, wow, this sure looks different than when I was a kid. They're like corporate bike shops. And they're actually, it's great because it serves a lot of people, and the whole point of cycling and what a shop does is to get people interested in cycling. Everything starts at the recreational level, and then it trickles down to commuting to work or getting your groceries or going from your weekend bike to a commuter bike, and it's all good. It's just different than what I'm used to seeing. So my passion is obviously making stuff that's as simple as possible and clean and straight as I possibly can. I mean, you know, the fork's got a beautiful paint job on it, but the focus of my bike is to protect it, make it a straight bike, and not a whole lot of bells and whistles. I mean, everything on here is exactly what this customer needs. He's got rack mounts and the brake selection he wants, and a fork that's really responsive and works well. So that's where I'm at now. I build custom bikes, and I still do it, and I love doing it. And the only reason I'm still doing this at 65 years old is because I love doing it. And a lot of it's about relationships with people, meeting people and finding out what they need, and you know, just trying to make their cycling experience a good one, you know. And so as I fit people, I want to know about their riding styles, their old bike, what hurts, when it hurts, you know, are they sore in the neck and the back, and it's a relationship thing. So I kind of want to open it up to you guys. You're here to hear what I have to say, and you might have questions, and I'm happy to take this in any direction that you want, but that's kind of a little background, and I've got a lot of new projects going on. I've got a new gravel tie fork and a new, you know, we just started making our new seat posts, and of course I do everything custom. You know, people call up and say, hey, you know, I need a stem X, Y, Z, and we talk about it. And so there you have it. I make these Type D forks. I'm making these forks for about 40 years now, and it's a really, I mean, I think it's a wonderful fork, but it handles great. It's, you know, I've made full suspension bikes. I've done pretty much everything you can possibly do, but I'm sort of a basic, you know, bread and butter, get the job done, enjoy cycling. Do you guys have any questions? Okay.
I'm kind of interested because I'm a chemical engineer.
Okay.
So mechanical stuff doesn't really flip all the switches. I'm curious, why would, for all the pieces of the bike,
right?
But as one example, why would a seat post be curved ever so slightly?
Okay, good question. Here's the main important thing for a bike. Is in the old days we had quill type stems where it came up like 4 inches and out. And you had a certain selection, so bikes traditionally had a level top tube. This bike actually sits. You like this bike stand? It weighs 40 pounds. Anyway, okay, so traditionally, you know, bikes had level top tubes, and there was sort of a tradition kind of set, and it revolved around what was, I'll move this over a little bit, what was standard. You know, we had a standard steer size. And this is an important thing. Standards now change every 4 months. Like, and for a small builder, if it's something worthwhile going after, I have to make new tooling, whether it's a tire size or drivetrain size, clearance for drivetrains, for tires, for the list goes on. So that can kill you if you don't. So you got to pick and choose really what's really going to make the bike better. It's like the question would be, why are we fixing something that's already working or it's not broken? You know. So what I do on this curved seat post, I make them from 0 to 20 millimeter setback. It's called the setback. And all that is for, I'm going to set the bike in the proper location here. That setback is to get the rider in the proper location on the bike, over the cranks, and with the relationship with the handlebar. Not just the handlebar, but the handlebar drop relative to the saddle. Okay, so in the old days, this would have been a level top tube. You'd have a really short seat post. You wouldn't have much standover. And forks were, of course, a little bit shorter. This is a gravel bike with a little longer fork, so everything comes up a bit. So this does 2 things. My philosophy on bike design is, number 1, period, fit the rider. And the geometry is a definition of weight bias. How much weight is on the rear wheel, how much is on the front wheel, because that's very important. So let's just set aside the geometry. Let's say I get somebody that's 6'2", and they've got XYZ leg length and arm length, and they're, you know, I kind of take some body measurements. So I kind of know what their weight bias is on the geometry. So I get the geometry dialed in, but equally more important is their rider fit. So I know that the bike's going to work weight-wise and geometry-wise, but now I've got to fit the customer on the bike properly, so they're over the cranks properly. So the relationship to the handlebars and the saddle, their seat height is all correct. So let's say I've got to get some tire clearance and I've got a short chain stay, and I need to get them back a little bit. So the curved seat post helps with that. It just adds some setback. Now your saddle has 3/4 of an inch fore and aft also. So I try to get people fitting into a neutral position on their bike. And what happens is we're not getting younger, any of us. We're getting older. As you get over, you want to maybe make some adjustments to your rider position. And most of that would mean bringing the handlebars up a little bit. I mean, when you're younger, you're Johnny Racer, you're in the aggressive climbing position. And it's great. When you're young, you can race in a shopping cart and win if you're strong. You can get used to anything. But when you get older, you know, I don't like that position anymore. So what I try to do is I try to give the rider a little bit of latitude in their rider position on the bike. So there's two things about the bikes I do. I like to give you ample standover clearance. Because when you're on level ground, you've got plenty, but if you're climbing a steep hill and you've got to get off, it's reduced because the bike is now, you know, steep in the front. So this gets closer to your crotch and you have less standover room. Two things it does, and of course I make bikes out of titanium, which is the right material for this particular concept. I like to make bikes that have a lot of standover, so it gives it a radically sloping top tube. It does two things. It makes a lighter frame. It makes a torsionally more rigid frame because the tubes are more in line with the torsional loads between here and the rear wheel. So when you're out of the saddle, the bike feels really good. And it gives you inline compliance because your seat post can actually do some of the absorbing of the ride. So if you imagine this level top tube, you'd have a short, stout thing. You'd have a heavier frame. They kind of feel like noodles because you've got all frame and it's way out of line with the loads. And you've got a short seat tube, so it's kind of a harsh ride inline. So this bike, you get more torsional rigidity and more inline compliance for a comfortable ride. So that's why I do it. And you know, some people order them straight because we need to get them further forward. They have a shorter torso or shorter arms. So that's all about rider placement.
What do you think about all the bottom bracket standards?
Bottom bracket standards? Where do I start? Okay, so this is funny, because I get customers, they'll say, hey, how about this new press fit or slip fit? I had to do press fit 40 years ago because we couldn't get bottom brackets. We'd use a standard automotive bearing, and we actually made those a grease guard bearing. We laser cut a groove in them. The list goes on. But they were great because we could put a square spindle in and adjust the chain line. And they were very durable and really good. But the problem with press fit type of bearings is you have two bearings with 2 outer races and 2 inner races, and you have to have them both aligned. It's called preload. Let's say you put the bearing in from inside and you press it, and you press it in. So one bearing can take a little bit more load because it's getting the load first. So now you have races that are not aligned perfectly, and it's called preload. You feel the bearing, and it's a little stiff and grainy. So it takes somebody that has some knowledge on how to unpreload that press-in bearing to make it so it will last, unless you're using what's called an angular contact bearing, which takes a radial and an axial load the same. So instead of the ball races being like this with the ball in the middle with this kind of load, the angular contact bearing is sort of at an angle, so it can take radial and axial loads the same. So it's like an adjustment. So what do I think about them? A lot of the things that are going on the market, whether it's slip fit or press fit, is to make OEM assembly really quick and easy. And so when you have carbon bikes, you know, they machine a sleeve, it's quick and easy, and the guys just put the bearings in or they Loctite them in, and it's very quick. It's hard to do threaded, you know, it takes more time to put a threaded part. That's where a headset came from. You know, you can see a guy at the factory with 2 wrenches like this, instead of putting the thing on, slapping it on, and putting a thing and torquing it down once for your headset adjustment. It's a time saver, and they work great. They're great. There's different reasons for doing things, and a lot of it is for the ease of assembly and putting things together and cutting the cost. And so that's something you got to really be. When it comes to bottom brackets, you can travel, if you're into bike packing, you can go anywhere in the world and buy an English bottom bracket. You know, and it's easy to put in, and you can adjust them and they're fine. Anybody can do it, and it's practical. And I'll always lean towards practical. So it's kind of, somebody, had a question there? Oh.
Was Schwinn the name of the bike company that you were doing with Mark, or was it just a model?
Wait a second.
Was you have Schwinn bikes?
Oh yeah, I started, okay, yeah. Okay, so even when I was a young guy, everything I did was, fillet brazed. You know, guys know what fillet brazing is. Everything's got to be tangent, no undercutting. It takes a lot of time to braze bikes. I've made between 5,000 and 6,000 bikes in my career. I used to sit on a little stool with 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 bikes, tandems, everything lined up. And I'd sit there and I'd go, I'm going to braze, 40 head tubes today. And I got really good at it. And I'd sit there, but it was a lot of work, just brutal. And then I had the grinding room. All the nerves in my hand are shot from running die grinders at 22,000 RPM all day long, cleaning the brass. And the whole thing was, it was just aesthetically the most beautiful way. And, TIG welding wasn't as, advanced as it is now. And there was no lugs, so we would butt the tube, we would miter and butt them, and we'd braze them. And so everything worked well. It was a very strong construction way to do a bike that had, new geometry and stuff. So, so the Swift came along. This is like 35 or 30 years ago. We thought, we're going to make a more economical bike. We just, So I made a bike that was TIG welded, and it was done a little differently. I still did a fillet brace in the down tube, head tube junction, because it's a stronger joint, because the TIG welding is a hotter, and it cools up quicker, so it's harder, but it's brittle, and the brazing would anneal that particular area, so it was more ductile, and it could take fatigue cycles much better. So anyway, we came out with the Swift. It was a great little bike. I made a couple hundred of them. And that, now I think there's a couple bike companies called Swift, I'm not sure, but I did that 30 years ago. But it was a way to address people who couldn't afford a fully fillet brazed bike. And I, just so you know, I'm into everything. I had to do everything. I had to do my own paint work. If you guys look at the head badge there, I'm going to tell you my first head badge, I would build bikes all day long. Then I'd go home at night and I had brass and a coping saw. And I was cutting out my head tube badges, and I made a little die to bend them and polish them. So I thought, if I can make 1 or 2 head badges every night after work. Well, I made hundreds of those until I couldn't even see straight. And so I finally came up with a good friend of mine, Uwe Vegerby, who is a jeweler. And we spent 1.5 years making this head plate. We didn't just want to design it, we wanted to make it. So the first head badges we made the investment casting machine, the oven. We had a little oven, and we made a centrifugal spinner. And I took all my leftover brass. People use casting bronze, but I used my leftover brass. We heated it up, and we would make 75 head badges at once. We made the latex molds, we made everything. And we did that for a couple of years, and I thought, I'm taking on way too much painting. So we found a little family. We made the tooling, but we gave it to them, and we had them do the casting. And this is what it ends up. And this is Mount Tamalpais, where I, raised. My inspiration of mountain biking. And so we made everything, and, it was just the way I couldn't, I had to make everything. The paint, I had to be the painter. I've done a lot of painting. I painted a lot of bikes for other painters, for other builders. Salsa and Richie and uh-oh. So anyway, more questions? Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, you.
So when you make custom bicycles,
Yeah.
when a customer comes to you, do you build strictly for their preferences? Thinking about trends, like if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I want disc brakes, or how much of your personal bicycle ideologies or biases go into your custom frames, or are they strictly what the customer wants?
No, okay, it's not strictly what the customer wants, but it ends up to be what they want. My job... Okay, we're up for another really good story. Do you guys remember Alfie Hutchins? He made the most beautiful, he's an old European builder. An old friend of mine, the curve stays. And that was because his bikes were used and you couldn't put your name on it. So the stays were his signature. So Alfie Hutchins was an old gentleman, kind of like me, but maybe a little older. And a friend of mine, Turo Richardson, who had made bikes for it, went over to, he ordered this bike and he flew over there to Europe to get his bike. And he goes up and he knocks on Alfie's door and he cracks and goes, what do you want? He goes, Alfie, it's Turo Richardson. He says, I'm here to pick up my bike. And he goes, come back in 3 days. He closes the door and Turo's like, whoa, This Hutchins was the most beautiful bike I've ever seen. It was glorious. But I got to tell you the story. So Turo comes back 3 days later. Hi, Alfie, it's Turo. My bike is, come in. He comes in, he says, there's your bike. And the bike is beautiful. It's this candy apple red. And Turo goes, but Alfie, I asked for blue. It's red, you'll like it. So that's my Alfie Hitchens story. So with my customers, my job is not to force my ideals on them. My job is to have a conversation with them to help educate them why I think something is more practical than other. And there's guys building absolutely beautiful bikes out there. And I love it all because what it does is it inspires people about bikes, whether it's beautiful paintwork, lug work, anodizing, whatever. But you're putting your energy into those things that have little effect on the ride of the bike. So since I'm getting a little older and I have limited time, I try to put my energy into functional stuff. So if a customer comes with me and they want this, like I get customers, this is what people come to me with. Steve, I really want one of your bikes and I want to make it future-proof. So I want you to put disc brakes on it, and I'd like to have cantilevers too, and I'm going to have 3 different size racks. And there may be a new rack coming out, and I'm kind of wondering about the bottom bracket, whether I should go with this or that. And I want the fork to be suspension corrected, so you can make me a 20-inch rigid fork, but I want the rigid fork on there. So I get all this information, and I say, well, first of all, why don't we just put the best brake there is now on it, because you're never going to change the brake. If you want a rigid bike, let's put a rigid fork on it with the proper length because it'll perform good and it'll be more reliable. If you want a suspension fork, I mean, can you imagine going out to your garage and go, I'm going to go for a ride today. I think I'll rip the fork out, put the suspension fork. No, I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll put this, you just don't do it. And what you want to do is you want to make a bike that fits your needs. And there is no future proofing because what you thought was going to be the future goes this way. This is even no longer the future. So I think it's important to select the very best components you can at the time and just go with it, make the bike. I mean, I'll have braze-ons all over the bike, like 3 rack worth of braze, the Belgian rack and the tiny rack for the weekend latte run and the one big for the trips and I mean, I get every kind of request you could absolutely imagine. And I want my bike to fit 2 size tires, which I've done. I want it to fit 29 or 2.25 and a 27.530, and it's got to do, and I've done those things because some of those things are practical, but my job is not to force them, I want them to get the bike they want. My job is to help educate them and give them the information so they can make a good decision. It's not to coerce them, because if my customer's not happy with the bike, it's not fun. It's just not what I'm doing. So I try to give them the information, and if they're not sure, I say, well, ask around, do some talking, talk to these people, that people, and check out these components. And generally, people will settle in. It's really easy. People can read magazine articles, and they're saying, Steve, I want a new bike, and I want, geometry is all over the board now. I mean, some of these bikes have a real useful purpose. I try to design my mountain bikes. This is how I do it. If you're going to go for a ride, whether it's a loop ride or an out and back, this is 100% of your ride. I want that bike to work as best as I can over the entire 100% ride. That means you've got a bit of climbing, you've got a bit of descending, you've got a bit of single track, and I want the bike to do everything really well. And I want you to enjoy your ride. It's got to be light and supple and handle well. Well, some people are like, I want a bike that's got, this really long front end, short stem, and it's going to have a 66 head angle, and I'm going to have a fork that's got 160 millimeters of travel, and this and that. And those bikes are absolutely incredible when you're flying down a rocky trail 700 miles an hour. But climbing, they're okay, but they're not great to climb because they're just the geometry. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a bike that will do really well over the range of a cycling. And I have made specialized bikes. I've made, bikes that are great for downhill, that are just for racing. I've made bikes for cross country. I've made, touring bikes that are just for touring and commuter bikes and all that. But I try to help people make practical decisions and give them a really good bike that they're going to enjoy, because people in their heads have, I want my bike to do everything, but what they really do is they have a habit. They usually do one thing. They usually go, I go on my weekend rides, I go right up this mountain, and I do that. And, I might once a year take it to this and stuff. So you got to try to make the bike work really well for what their needs are. And I try to just I try to get them through the excitement of they can do everything to, let's just make the bike work really well for what you're really going to do with it. So that's kind of the answer to that. Oh, go ahead.
Could it be that they're married and only have one bike?
What's that?
Could it be that they're married and only allowed to have one bike?
Yes, that's a problem. But the boss has to okay all these things.
There seems to be a trend, custom builders, frame builders in the tie, and I love tie frames, mountain bike frames, Jeff Jones-esque seat stays that are, S-bend, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how effective are they with vertical
He's
compliance?
checking with his wife right now.
Okay. I just wonder how effective is that with altering the seat stays? And this is for mountain bikes, strictly
Okay.
mountain bikes. How effective that is for vertical compliance and comfort?
Okay.
To go something that,
Well,
Crazy with
first
that.
of all, I mean, okay, a tube is at its structurally best when it's straight. Okay, these S-bends right here, they're very subtle. They will actually reduce the torsional. They concentrate it. They concentrate it in the bend area, which if your bike's built stout enough, it can handle all that. The reason these are there is so you have heel clearance. This right here is so you have heel clearance for my big old 13 size shoe. So there are functional reasons I do that. People, and here's another thing. People buy bikes for different reasons. People like swoopy tubes, and they're beautiful. It reminds them of the old paperboy bikes. And there's a lot more compliance in it, but there's more material when you go from point A to B and you add a curve to it, you're adding more material. And a lot of it's aesthetics, and it's beautiful, and the bikes work wonderful, they're fine. But if you're gonna go racing, you're not gonna take that kind of bike. But if it's a bike you enjoy, I say go for it. But a lot of those things do compromise in very sometimes unnoticeable ways. You would never really notice it unless you're racing or something. That it's a little bit more supple or not as torsional.
that's for me. I don't race. I just enjoy to ride.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there is that vertical compliance, not torsional.
Well, yeah, and
but
sometimes if you put the curve in the correct direction, it can give you some comfort. Just there's always a plus and minus. Everything has an effect on everything else. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, in regards to disc brakes, rim brakes,
Yeah.
obviously, disc brakes are around a long time on
Yeah.
mountain bikes, but they're relatively new in the road bike world. Someone actually called my touring bike old school because it had rim brakes.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, it's
Well-
not that old. Where is it going? Is it time to make the change?
Yeah.
Just kind of comment on that trend on disc
Okay.
brakes.
Well, first of all, brakes are super important. Number one. Okay. You choose a brake for different reasons. The disc brakes are incredible because there's a lot of. It's a great question because disc brakes bring up a lot of new problems and challenges too. So, okay, let's go to this bike. It's got cantilever, but it's going to have Paul Mini motos on it. This is going to be a travel kind of road bike, and they're easy. It's just easy. They're simple. The bike can come apart. The wheel can come out easy. There's no hydraulics. The guy wanted cable, simple, and they work really well. And it's kind of old school, but they do work well. Your rim is actually a big disc brake. It's just a different thing. Now, disc brakes are really incredible. They're high performance. They're lightweight. The heat is concentrated in the disc itself and not the rim. The abuse is concentrated into the pads and the disc and not the rim. I used to race tandems a lot, and I have worn through rims just on one race. And when I first started racing I made a mountain bike tandem, and people laughed at me. And we totally cleaned the clocks, and it was. But one race we were clocked over 60 miles an hour on the old TNT, and it was. You can go in one race, and if it's got the right kind of soil, whether it's decomposed granite or something, sand is Rockwell 65. It's really hard. You can wear through a rim so quick. I've actually worn through the rim and had the tire blow off. But the other concept too is I used to do a lot of pack trips with my family and my son in tow in a Burley, and I've gone down steep grades where I've blown both tires at once from the heat from the brakes, even having a dragger brake. So what you've done is you've transferred all the heat and wear off the rim surface, which is important to keep intact, to the disc brake. Now the disc brake is specifically just for braking, which is a good thing. Now with the disc brake in mind, I wish I had a disc brake here to show you, The disc brake distributes and does different things with those loads quite differently than a rim brake. And what it does is, number one, it puts about a 1,000-pound load on the brake, on the component that's holding the brake mount. A 1,000-pound load and a gigantic, huge torque load. It's unbelievable. So on the rear, it's a little easier to deal with. I make a water jetted part that comes way up to here, and it distributes that load through the seat stay. And so it's not an abrupt, 1,000-pound load. It's distributed, so there's no hot spot or place it wants to break. So on the front fork, you have a single leg. I think he's going to get permission too. on the fork, you've got one leg, and it's just hanging there by itself, and you don't want that to fail. It's on the front. But that also takes a 1,000-pound load at maximum braking for an average 180-pound rider, and that turns into a rotational load that wants to just break the fork. So you may have seen a picture of my disc brakes. I run a torsion rod up to the crown where it's really thick. And we've done the testing. So this is what it turned out to be. When we put the load on that's required for you to pass, with a fork with no quick releases in it, the left blade or the non-disc side moves about 400 thousandths. It's a little less than half an inch. And the other side moves 2.2 inches. So it's about four times the load on the disc brake side. And there's also a torsion load that you haven't even measured yet. You're just talking about the braking force. So what happens is you want a fork that's supple that gives you a good, comfortable ride. You don't want to have to make the right blade out of 0.95 and the left one out of 0.35. That's the wall thickness of the tubing. You want it to feel supple so you have a really comfortable ride and you can go somewhere. But what I did is I would actually prefer to have the brakes in front of the fork, because then I could put that rod in tension, which would be 10 times stronger than a compression. 90% of all mechanical failures are compression failures, whether it's a house, a building, a bike, a car. So this isn't compression. That's the way the brakes are set to go behind the fork blade. So anyway, I did that so I could get the both blades moving at the 400 thousandths under the full load. So I've got a really nice feel, lightweight fork that distributes that torsional and that braking load up to the crown. The crown is a lot thicker and can take that abuse. So
Can you two bolt like right into the seat stay or right?
Oh, being flat mounts?
Yeah, are those strong enough? I mean, are those going to last?
Well, okay, there's a couple things with flat mount brakes. Flat mount brakes, there's very limited room to get them in there. And on a small bike, it gets really crunched down. And then you started having to lift up your seat stay to get away from it. And then you get away from you're adding weight, more material, it's harder to make. It gets out of the practical range. So I do flat mounts, but very rarely, and it's a total pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But they're cool. They're sleek and they're small and they're low profile. I mean, there's benefits and drawbacks to everything. And but yeah, and so remember, the disc brake comes out, and we're going to put them on bikes. Well, the disc brake part's great, but then you've got to deal with all the loads to old-fashioned way of making bikes. And now you have to discover how to make a bike strong enough to take this new technology. So it's been a real ride. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Anybody? Yeah.
You all drove titanium frames. So what environment do you use?
I do. Okay, so I weld everything. I'm one of those guys that's cursed. I got to build my own house. I got to build my own lumber. I got to do my own concrete countertops. I got to build my own hood. It's a horrible sickness. I got to make the head plates. I got to make, So I do all my own welding. I have an ultrasonic cleaner. First, the tubing is mitered. It's measured, mitered, and cut. It's fit to the frame. The fit is extremely important, especially in the rear of the bike, the stays. And the alignment of the clocking of the miters has to be perfect. And it's very difficult to straighten a titanium frame. They are so strong. You can't just willy-nilly a bike together. You have to follow a welding schedule. You've got to tack in a certain place. You have to weld it in a certain direction on both sides. Everything's got to be really scheduled. So what I do is I cut the tubes. I clean them. I physically clean them with the Scotch-Brite. They go into an ultrasonic cleaner, which is like a $8,000 dishwasher. But you have to do it.
Yes.
And then I've got a supply of white gloves. I'm Michael Jackson time too. And you put them on. Everything's got to be clean. Your welding rod's got to be clean. I have a stainless welding table. I make all my own purging. I make my own welding cups. I make everything. And so I weld them, and it's an argon atmosphere.
Use argon.
Argon, yeah. And So I make exterior cups. I have cups that go in the dropouts when I weld the dropouts. I have gas going in the frame. It's a real involved process. So the thing about titanium, you can see beautiful welds all over. It takes a long time for a guy to get there. It's like playing the piano. It's like you can go hang out with a great piano player, but you still have to go home and practice 10 hours a day if you want to play the piano. I mean, if you want to play it really good. And titanium's like that. It's very difficult. You could just absolutely imagine trying to get the welder in here and then blowing out the tube. You got to start over. You got to cut it apart. It's brutal. So the learning curve for titanium is really steep and very frustrating, very painful. I mean, I've welded thousands of bikes, and if I'm not learning every day, imagine you have about 12 things going on in your mind at once when you're welding. Your heat, your how clean tight things are, but mentally you're watching your heat range, your pulse range, your filler material. You have to do a fusion weld first, so it's double pass welding. And so you're trying to time all this stuff too. It's like trying to make a good song that's timed properly and not too loud, not too soft. So there's a lot going on when you're doing that. So your welding rod's got to be clean. Everything's got to be perfectly clean. And you got to have a good steady hand, and you got to keep your eyes in good shape. Yeah.
How do you collect your gas after you're done?
No, it's gone.
Once you just dissipate?
It dissipates. Yeah, there's argon in the air now. It's in smaller amounts. And argon can be very dangerous. It's an inert gas. It won't hurt you, but inert is heavier than oxygen. So if you're in a small room, it'll suffocate you.
Yeah, that's why I was asking how you use a ventilated system.
Well, it's so little. It's ridiculous. It's a non-reactive material. The argon is completely unharmful in that environment. Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
Forgive me, I came in late, so if you've already addressed this.
You want to go over the whole thing? I can.
I got a segue to what you just said.
Yeah.
In 1986, I went up to the Ross stage race in Massachusetts, the first one, and I met Gary Helfrich, who was working for Chris Chance.
Yeah.
And he was riding a titanium tandem that he rode from Cambridge.
Yeah.
And then apparently the story I got was that he couldn't talk Chris into making the move to titanium.
Yeah.
He moved to Camp Meeker in California. Did you learn under him?
No. I mean, Gary's always been helpful, but I didn't learn. Gary and I've had a lot of talks, and I've just recently I've been helping Chris Chance build some bikes too. I've built for a lot of different builders. But Gary's always been an inspiration. He's fun to talk to, and everybody helps. Everybody helps along the way. And one of the things I did go to the Merlin factory when I was younger, and one of the things I did is I called the company once, and I had no idea they were actually going to follow through, but I said, I'm learning how to, weld titanium, and if you have scraps, could you just send them to me? I mean, I was happy if I got anything. And, I forgot about the phone call, and then one day UPS shows up with a gigantic box of titanium, and I went, jackpot! I mean, you can't believe how excited I was. So I pulled this stuff out, and I cleaned it, and I welded for a couple of years. I welded everything I could before I made a bike out of it. But, I've learned stuff from everybody. I keep learning. If you stop learning, you're in so much trouble. Every time I go, I want my next bike to be better than the last. And I work in an area where it's 110 in the summer. I'm up in the mountains. And that's when I get blown out of my welding chair because I'm all hot and sweaty, and I get grounded somehow, and I'm pulling out of the chair. And in the wintertime, it's 10 below zero. So my welds, I have to adjust for all of that. I have to absolutely be relaxed. The temperature has a huge deal with how a weld is, how you adjust your welder. But I've learned from everybody. I've learned from Gary. I've learned from just a ton of people. Brad Bingham.
He told me the only thing he had available was aircraft hydraulic tubing. It was all straight gauge stuff.
Well, it is, yeah. Well, Gary started welding his first bikes in garbage bags because nobody knew how to do it. You had to protect everything with argon, and so they filled up a bag, a Glad bag, garbage bag. From what the stories are, they filled it up with argon to try to evacuate the oxygen, and they welded bikes inside a bag. So it was, they tried everything. So everybody in life is standing on somebody else's shoulders to a degree. I mean, technology is just racing through, and you got to pay attention. You had a question? Okay. Yeah.
You said you were in Maryland?
Pardon me?
You were in Maryland for a while?
No, I went there and visited. I was a friend of Gwen's, and I got to hang out with those guys. But you know, when you want to know something, you're just absorbing. You know, I've always done that. I try to learn as much as I can where I go.
Do you have any experience with Spectrum then? Or?
No, with Bill Kellogg.
Yeah,
No, or Tom Kellogg. Yeah. No, I love him. He's a great guy, wonderful guy.
I saw his first frame back in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
Seminar like this, he walks out and throws the frame on its side, jumps up and down the triangle. He goes, "This is why I buy titanium, not steel."
Yeah.
It kind of sold me on the frame.
Oh, it's unbelievably strong. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robert.
Can you or would you ever re-release the roller cam?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. You guys, I'm so old that some of my older stuff goes for more than my new stuff. Sometimes I think I could make some counterfeit of the old ones. I could be a millionaire. Well, it's really funny. Okay, so now my friend Jeff here, Jeff Albert's here, and Jeff has known me for years, and sometimes my buddies come by, "Can we look through your drawers?" And you know, I got drawers of stuff, and when I just made a move, I found a box with roller cam brakes in it. I could almost send my kids to college. It was like, you know, they were brand new, and you know, I sell them to collectors, and I always I've always tried to give somebody value. I've never tried to take advantage of somebody, you know, just because you can. It's like, well, these are the last in the world, they're going to cost you $10. It's just like, I'll get a good premium price for them, but it's good to see them get on a bike and get used by somebody who appreciates them. But some of the older stuff, yeah, Robert, I'd love to have all the time in the world. So here's one of the problem with a guy that likes to make everything.
You have the space for CNC.
What's that?
You have the space for CNC.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so what happens is you want to make everything, but you only have so much time in life. And every now and then, I've got all these old machines, you guys. I buy funky machines that are so broken down, and I restore them, and they're beautiful. And they do one thing for me. I have 6 little mills, and they're set up so the chains stay miter, just one miter, but it's perfect, and I don't have to reset the machine. Every time you move your tooling, you have a chance of making a mistake. So I set them up. But so every now and then I go, you know, I'm only 65. I'd love to learn how to program CNC and get a little mill and start making this part. And then I go, what am I thinking? I'll call up Mark Thurston in Paragon and have him make it, and I'll go fishing, which I need to do more of. But yeah, I'd like to bring a lot of old products back, and it'd be fun because, I mean, obviously there's a market for things that are just simple and practical. There's, you know, let's just take cyclocross racing. You know, you're in a muddy condition. If you have to blow a wheel out, cantilevers are like so simple because you just blow it out, throw the wheel out, get another tire in there, and you put it in, you snap them together. If you have a disc brake, disc brakes work great, and they especially work good in the mud and the rain, but you got to get the thing lined up, and you know, it might take you 10 seconds more, but there's always going to be a market for cantilevers or rim brakes, I think, because they're simple. And they're easy for people to adjust, and there's no magic about it. The disc brake can be a little mysterious, like, you know, I can't see the pads, but what kind of clearance do they have to have? You know, and it's not that they're bad, it's just it takes a little more technological wherewithal to keep things running. So I know we're almost out of time because he's yawning.
Who are you mentoring?
Oh, sorry, what?
Who are you mentoring? Who are you passing your knowledge on to?
My boys. Yeah, my sons are, my oldest son's a mechanical engineer. But he's really smart. He says, Dad, you got to work really hard to do this. I used to do these seminars for schools, and I would go from kindergarten, literally. I spoke at Stanford, but I remember being in this one that was, it was 1 through 6th grade. And so at the end of the thing, I said, do any of you want to, you know, be a bike builder? Kid raised his hand. He goes, nope. I go, why? And he says, it's way too much work. So you had a question, sir?
Yeah, in terms of the trend issues and stuff like that, as a consumer,
Yeah.
some of us are just regular consumers. It's like, how do we sort out, every year, you know, there's the new frame geometry and the new wheel sizes.
Okay.
It's like, how do we sort all that out
That's a
to
good
something
question.
that will work for us?
Okay, that's a good question. Here's what, it's, you try to keep it as simple as you possibly can. The simplest answers are usually the truest answer and the more realistic one. If you get too complicated and things you can't even feel or reach, it's not. So what I would ask, number one, is why should I have this? How is it going to make my riding experience better? That's really what it comes down to. And again, I go back to my overall riding experience, which is, oh, it's going to make me go faster downhill, but I ride only 10% of my ride's downhill. What about the other 90%? So I just say, put it in practical terms. Why is this going to make my ride better? And how's this going to make my riding experience? That's what it really comes down to. I mean, bikes are cool, paint jobs are cool, carbon fiber is great. All those things are great, but does it make your riding experience better? So people come out with things like a new technological thing, and you just say, is it going to make the repair more reliable? If I break something, is it going to make it, is it going to be easier for me to fix? Because you don't want to have to take your bike to a shop every time something goes wrong. So I just ask practical questions. How is this going to be better than what I'm already riding? So that's kind of the simple terms answer. You can call me if you have a question. I'll walk you through it. Anybody else? Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for a frame loader that's just starting out?
Really? Oh, are you in school? Do you have an engineering background? No. No, I'm being serious though. Are you in school right now?
Yeah, I'm a sophomore in high school.
Okay, sophomore in high school, okay. Here's what I say. This is probably the most important thing, is there's a couple things that you take into account. I would ask, if you have a passion for bikes, do you want to keep that passion a weekend passion so it stays like a fun thing that you can come to, or do you want to make it a vocation? So that's what I would ask. The other thing is no matter what glorious job you get in the world, there's going to be challenges. You're going to hate it sometimes. I'm not saying I don't hate bike building. A lot of times I don't like ordering material. I don't like doing books and spreadsheets and paying my sales tax and dealing with emails. But you have to do those things. So you have to ask, where am I going to use my skills the very best? So I would say, are you passionate about it? Do you love doing it? Are you willing to being self-employed and being a bike builder is very hard. You can't just be a bike builder. I mean, you have to be everything. You have to do the dishes, everything. Unless you really have a plan. If you're really good at business, you could be a hands-on guy. You could be. See, I'm kind of cursed. I'm not good at business. I love people and I love making things. But you have to have planning skills. You have to have some really good business skills. So what I would do is focus on how you would approach your bike business. If you're going to become a builder, I would say, decide whether you want it to be a passion, or it can still be a passion and a vocation, but you have to protect it. You have to like to want to go to work every day. You have to say, I'm going to get, it's the 95.5, you're going to get some customers, no matter what you do, you can't make them happy. And you still have to have a good attitude and try to achieve that. It's just, you just have to know your limitations, what you're doing. So I would say a good advice for a new builder is keep going to school and be serious about that. Don't go to school and waste time. Go to school and learn everything you can. Read books, go to the library, do your very best, and do your bike thing as a passion until you get a feel for it. And you will know. You won't have to guess by the time you get there. It's when I race motorcycles, everybody goes, "Oh, that's great! It's fun! It's this and that." By the time you turn pro, you have fallen down so many times. You've had so many hard knocks. You're really asking the question, is this what I want to do? And it gets really serious really quick. And I went pretty far in it. And I got to a place where I had so many things going. I went, if I don't do racing 100%, I'm going to get killed. Because you have to give it 100%. You can't give it 80% or 95%. It's a deadly game. When you do your business, you need to do it so you do it efficiently, and you also have a balanced life to where you can have a family someday, you can make money, but you really have to have a plan. It's really good. You have to think about it, but just be really focused on what you're trying to achieve and start those thinking and those organizing skills early in your life. But get your education in there, do it for fun, develop some skills where you get a feel for it. I tell kids in school, I go get a job. I don't care what it is. You think, oh, I'm not going to do that. And they go, wow, that was actually pretty cool. Or they'll go to their dream job and they go, well, this wasn't as cool as I thought. So what I say is go out and do things so you get a feel for it. You go, I really enjoyed that. And then you're going to have to develop skills and a attitude about being self-employed, because cash flow is hard. Customers can be difficult. Doing bills and managing things can be a total. If I had my perfect world, I'd walk in the door, right through that office. I was the last one in my own company of 30 people. We had 29 computers. Guess who didn't have a computer? I was like, I'm going to the shop. I love to weld. I'm going to make bikes. If I could do that every day, it'd be great, but I have to do other things too. So I would just say be very deliberate about what you're doing. Don't waste time in school. Get a good education and be vigilant because you don't get it back. Time is the only resource you have in your life. So be very focused. Read history, read business, read everything, and just make good decisions, you know. I'm starting to sound like his parents. And eat your vegetables. So, any other questions? I could go on forever, you guys. I got a lot of stories. So, now.
What's your feeling about the T47 bottom bracket standard?
Well, T47 has a place, and for me personally, it's probably different for each builder. It's got a larger, size diameter, so you can move tubes around and be good for certain things. But this works pretty good. Yeah. And the thing about the T47 for a builder, okay, for me, it's a little thinner tube gauge. I could have them made bigger, but it's a finer thread. The taps are extremely expensive. And, they may be bigger, bearing is stronger and all that, but I kind of go with practical, it's got a place, but, it's not for everybody.
Are you not making your own tops?
No, I've done all that before. I'm getting too old for that.
What kind of bike do you ride?
I got a 29er, and my son's got, we kind of rob each other's bikes. He's got a gravel bike, and I pretty much ride my 29er. It's an S&S coupling one. I can just throw it in the truck and go. If I need to go somewhere, I can take it apart and take it with me. But I ride a 29er with just 2.1 tires on it, my Type 2 fork, flat bars. And my son rides a gravel bike with 45 millimeter tires. And, just simple, rigid. We just did these awesome single tracks. Okay, this is really, the geezer and his son go up there. He's on a rigid gravel bike. I'm on a rigid 29er. And the bands are pulling up. It's an 18-mile beautiful single track in Ashland, Oregon, and people, their helmets and knee pads and everything full. I'm like, wow. We ride it, we have a complete gas, and they go a little faster than us, no doubt. But I have a gas. It's just fun, It's just I'm out on a bike. My whole idea about cycling is just getting out there. I mean, I raced, I did all that stuff, but I just like to be out there. I just want to get from point A to point B without being all banged up, and So somebody else had a question. Oh.
How much of your life is spent responding to emails from
well, let's see.
Like
Okay, when the computer thing came out first, I went, what's this email stuff? I can't just send a letter. Anyway, well, I get it now. It's very quick and all that, but I've had customers send me 200 to 300 emails about questions. And I try to get through them as quickly as I can. I have a time of the day I do it, but they're actually an essential part of the conversation. I'm fine with it, and it's a good way to transfer, information. What I eventually have to do with customers is sometimes I get a customer and he says, when I was a kid, I had a red Schwinn, and I liked the purple better, but the red, and it goes on for 4 pages. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to consolidate the 4 pages into what does he really want, and then what I do is I send him forms. Bye, you guys. I hope it was fun. Stop yawning. Let's see. Thanks for coming. So what happens is I've got to condense it down from all this information to what does he want. And then I send him a form so he can actually start checking things off. Because what will happen is let's say it's 70 emails, which is not unusual. Somewhere in there he said he wanted this vendor. Did I miss something? So what I try to do is I consolidate things to an order form, because then I go, there's the order form, and it's on there. So I have to try not to miss that in the conversation. So I have the people fill out the order form after we have the conversation, and then that's so I don't miss anything. So it's an essential part of business is that communication. So they're fine, and keep sending more. Carl's getting the bike. His wife approves. He's trying to control. So what's happening is we're trying to get it dialed in. And all that information is good, but what I'll do is I'll eventually consolidate it to a build sheet. And then, because if I don't have confidence in exactly what I know I'm building, I go slower. It's like, did he want purple or red? Anyway.
What's the average demographic of somebody who buys a bike?
As far as their location?
No, age group.
Age group, okay. I'd say anywhere from, honestly, well, I've made a lot of race team bikes and stuff, but I'd say 25 to 105. I mean, there are people who just appreciate just solid and something that fits them, and it's, they have an experience that works good for them, you know.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of guys that built bikes for 40 years ago, and they went through the whole, God, I got this suspension bike and this and that, and then they come back and go, you know, I want to order another bike. And what it is, it's simple and it's pure, and it's you know, and it fits their needs for what they're doing. That's kind of the demographic. It's, you know.
I guess I was just kind of trying to poke at the idea of like bikes, like how you said, just loving that you can just get out on a bike and have
Yeah.
fun. You know, and then like in that thread where the super custom bike sits in the industry.
Well, okay, so you know, for one, this guy offered, it got him the brake selection, the rack selection, the type of fork he wanted, his rider position's perfect. You know, it did the comfort, the whole, you know, the tube sizes, the wall thicknesses, you know, it's a package deal. It's a whole bunch of things, yeah. Okay, I don't want to wear you guys out. We're coming to an end here. Unless there's more questions. One more question, yeah.
How many bikes do you make a year, and what's the lead time?
Okay, so I'm making mostly Thai bikes. The most I've ever made working by myself is about 300 a year with one helper, and that's steel bikes, and that's really in my younger years. And now I make, and of course I make bikes for other builders still. I made a lot of the Castellanos and the tights, silk ties and the bow ties. And those are very complicated bikes. I just made 15 or 20 bikes with Chris Chance making his fat tire bikes, his 27.5s. And my own bikes, I'm making anywhere from 30 to 60 a year. But that, I'm not just making the bikes. I'm making the bikes. I make a bunch of seat posts. I make a bunch of custom stems. People order stems, and I turn them around like that. And I make a lot of forks. I make a road fork. I make a new Thai fork for gravel bikes. I make a mini Type 2 for road, mini Type 2 for gravel bikes, a mountain bike Type 2, and a plus Type 2. So I build a lot of forks. So it's, you know, if I just said, oh, I built 30 bikes, well, I built maybe 40 or 50 forks, and I built, you know, maybe 100 seat posts and 100 stems, and it's a lot of stuff. Not to mention, you know, people go, can you fix my bike? Can you fix my toaster? I'm pretty popular in my town, you know, I live in the middle of nowhere. I got this plumbing part. Anyway, it's fun to help out your neighbors. But any more of you guys have any questions?
Where are most of your customers?
They're kind of a mix. I'd probably say 70% the U.S., and the rest international. I mean, Asia, Europe a lot, Italy, Germany, France, England, Sweden. We're sending a bike this week to Sweden. Singapore, Japan, you know, it's a mix, you know. I mean, it's just that I've been around for so long that people even remember me. I'm not the flashy guy, you know, and I don't have a big, you know, presence. My son just helped me make a new website. It's going to be introduced this week. But I got plenty of work, and I love building the bikes, and I like making bikes that really work well for people. You know, I'm doing a little bit of production work just because I want to offer more things and stretch out a little bit. But pretty much that, yeah. You guys, well, thanks for coming. I thoroughly enjoyed it.